This is Leslie Walcott of the Peace Education Center. In this video, I interview PEC board member and longtime activist Anne Francis. I began by asking Anne what inspired her work with peace and justice.
On a personal level, I had a lot of experience with those issues, especially race and civil rights. You could not avoid having some knowledge of that if you lived in the South. So that was the beginning, and then I went into the Peace Corps, and this was in the 65, 67, and many of the people who were there were people who had been activists themselves, and I got exposed to a lot of ideas and activism there. And then when I got out, and I was motivated to join the Peace Corps because I really wanted to kind of right some of the wrongs that I had learned about in school.
So, Anne dove headfirst into justice work in Tennessee.
And the year that I was teaching there in Chattanooga, Martin Luther King was assassinated, and I was teaching in a black college there, and the students, of course, were devastated, and they really, really pushed me to get into the streets with them. There was a march, and it was relatively frightening because there was a lot of violence around that town, and we were sleeping on the floors and stuff, and so I really thank those students for their pushing me to do that. Mm-hmm. Well, it was a very important lesson for me. I've been a teacher a lot in my careers, and that student changed my life. That student coming and talking to me and just saying, you need to do this. It's very important. And I had actually a similar experience when I was in Malaysia with students there. There was a lot of tension between Malays and Chinese people, and we would talk a lot about racism. And I had a student there that challenged me and said, well, if you're that concerned about it, why don't you go back to the United States and work on race relations in your own country? And I heeded that advice. I had an opportunity to sign up again, and that was part of my consideration that maybe I needed to go home and stuff. So, yeah.
I also asked Anne about her job as the first coordinator of the Lansing Area Peace Council, which later became the Peace Education Center.
Through this organization that I was involved in was Annabelle Dwyer, and she told me about this group of people in Lansing and East Lansing who were interested in were forming the Lansing Area Peace Council, and it was kind of a network of people, and they were just in the beginning stages, and they were meeting at Eastern High School, and would I like to come to a meeting? And so I did. And at the time they were talking about hiring a person to be a coordinator, and I said to Annabelle, wow, if that position comes open, let me know. I'd sure be interested in a position that they pay somebody to organize. And so that was sort of the beginning. And then she called me in February of that year, and they had worked out some of the kinks, and she asked me if it was really true I was still interested, and that really began my involvement with the Peace Education Center.
I asked Anne what or who inspired her to continue to work for peace, justice, and equality throughout all her years of service.
Say that I've had a lot of personal support, even though my mother, I'm an only child. I think that has something to do with some of the choices I made. But my mom, even though she might not have agreed totally with a lot of my choices, was really very supportive of me. And I think that helps you keep going. If you have personal support, I know there's people that do it without it, but I think that I always knew there was somebody in my court, even when it was really, really difficult. And I have to say that's also true. I've met a lot of people who have really been my friends throughout this time, and very dedicated people, and that has really kept me motivated. I did a lot of work. I worked in the factory for 20 years, and the choice that I made to go there was a political choice, and there's a lot of harassment in general in the world, but there's a lot of harassment, and I think that when you're going up against systems that are not very friendly, you often don't see a lot of progress, and if you get isolated, I think that you can burn out and get very, very discouraged. And so I've been very fortunate to have supporters throughout, in terms of some of the risks that I've taken and some of the things that I've done. And now I always try to make a point of that. I try very hard not to do things alone. I mean, my heart is filled with justice work, but I think action requires, sometimes you have to act alone, but mostly organizing and being with others and seeking support if you run into problems is really critical, and I've learned to do that over time. So I think that keeps me going. Stop. You may not be as active sometimes, or you may make different choices, but I think that I have a very solid philosophical foundation. I have a very solid historical understanding of issues, and I've also studied social change, and I think that scholar practitioner kind of model is extremely vital in keeping going, and it feeds me.
Finally, Anne shared 2 of her favorite memories about her time with the Lansing Peace community.
Well, I have one very, I guess this would be in general across time, but early on, and also in these years, recent years that I've been back, you would say, in the early days, I remember we had this meeting, and it was at Lansing Community College, and we were planning some march. This was Vietnam War. It was some huge march that we were planning, and the Peace Council had major responsibility for this, and we were trying to figure out, our position, and also our stance, kind of how we would present ourselves and who would be involved. And this room was filled with about 60 people, and it was packed, and it was a lot of religious people, and there were people from the university, and there were a lot of young students, and there were university people, and there was a huge tension about style and language, and I absolutely thought this is going to fall apart, and my memory of it is that we, and there were probably 5 or 6 people I could identify now, particularly one gentleman, Jim Harrison, I think, maybe not Jim, what was his first name? Anyway, Mr. Harrison, Earl Harrison from the Fellowship of Reconciliation was in the room, and he stood up. He was like maybe 70 years old at the time, 75, and he just said, "We have to stop this. We've got to work this out, and we can do this." And it just changed everything, and everything fell into place, and we had a very successful march, and that really was a wonderful moment. And I guess a recent moment in the Peace Education Center that is a real powerful memory is the Rachel Corrie play that was put on out at what was that, at the, not, anyway, it was out at the Nature Center, and I just remember so many people coming to that, and what a powerful thing that was to offer to the community. And so many different kinds of people came to it. And I thought it was also a very courageous thing for the Peace Center to do, and because nobody really wanted to put that play on. And so I think that that's the kind of stance that's really needed.